who better to have on than Congressman Bobby Scott, Democrat, 3rd District, Virginia. Well, he's got a very long district. It's Portsmouth and all the way up there, and kind of changed a little bit. He has no opposition, so he's free and easy, but he's still out talking to voters. One of my favorite Democrats in the whole world also is my congressman. So I'm very blessed to have him, and he's with us now. Congressman Scott, great to have you with us, sir.
John, it's good to be with you. John, you know my district isn't long anymore. They cut it in half, and I just represent areas in Hampton Roads.
Oh, where is it now? Just tell me what it is quickly.
All or parts of Newport News, Hampton, Norfolk, Portsmouth, Chesapeake, Suffolk, Isle of Wight, and Franklin.
Okay, there you go.
That's it.
And, of course,
it's a nice little circle around Hampton, all or parts of those, all of Newport News, all of Portsmouth, all of Isle of Wight and Franklin, and parts of the others. But they're all all or parts of everything in Hampton Roads except Virginia Beach. The city's right on Hampton Roads.
No Virginia Beach, all in Hampton Roads. I live in Chesapeake. I'm in the 3rd District now.
Parts of the northern part of Chesapeake, northern part of Suffolk.
There you go. Okay, so now we understand. I was still trying to figure it out, but I'm glad I'm in your
just draw
district.
A circle around Hampton Roads, and you got most of my district.
All right, good deal. Lots to talk about today. Let's start with the Caravan. Congressman, we got a lot to cover in a period of time. Caravan. Well, let's see. We've got what looks like 10,000 people trying to bum rush the border of the United States. I mean, do you really think letting 10,000 people just walk in illegally is like a good thing?
John, it's not. First of all, it's not 10,000. The highest estimate I heard was like 3,000 or 4,000, and these people are 1,000 miles away from the United States border, and that border point is about 3,000 miles from here. So people don't need to have to worry about this. I think they ought to be treated just like the law provides that they be treated. If they show up at the border, if they're entitled to asylum, they should be given asylum. If not, they should not. One of the problems that it focuses on is we have a messed up immigration policy. The Senate bill a few years ago would have made great progress in making our immigration policy conform to reality. The fact of the matter is, if we really enforced the immigration law, there are 11 million people, give or take, in the United States that are here without documentation, and there is no plan to round them all up and get them out of here. You have businesses that can't operate. You've got a lot of industries, construction particularly, and hotel industries in some areas. They can't operate without people without documentation, and they cracked down in one Georgia city at a chicken processing plant. They cracked down, arrested everybody, and when the dust settled, the chicken plant had to close because they didn't have any workers, and the whole city went bankrupt because there's no money coming in. The restaurants didn't have any customers. The doctors didn't have any patients they could pay. I mean, it was just a total mess. If we need to pass comprehensive immigration reform so that we can conform a workable system that can be enforced, and I think that would take care of all of the people. This group coming 1,000 miles away from 3,000 miles away does not endanger anybody in Virginia. And when they're trying to take away your health care, when they're messing up the budget, when kids incurring student loans through the roof, I think the idea that people 4,000 miles away are creating a danger to your personal safety is absurd.
Well, first of all, they're not 4,000 miles away, Congressman. I have to correct you on that. They're less than 800 miles. That's number one.
Not from the border. And then that border point is how far from Norfolk, Virginia?
I don't care about Norfolk. I care about people in Texas and Arizona also. So, I mean, there's now funding
in
for
Tennessee,
charter buses.
immigration is the number one issue, and they are scared to death about the people 1,000 miles or 800 miles away from a border point that's several thousand miles from Tennessee, and they're scared to death.
Well, Congressman, the Mexican government, the ambassador and the interior minister said that they have direct evidence of criminals that have embedded inside of that caravan. They said there's a minimum of 270 of them that they could find, people that are wanted for crimes. in Mexico that are embedded in the caravan. There's also evidence that they're paying women and children money to go to the front of the line. I don't know how they're getting this money. But the bottom line is, whether it's 7,000 or 5,000, if you let them in, the second wave is going to be 70,000, and then it's going to be 7 million.
Well, who has said let them in?
Well, you just said
they will be processed at the border. Most of them will be turned around because they're not eligible for entry.
That's not true, Congressman, because the only way they get processed the right way at the border is if they go to one of the 80 points of entry and go through the system and stay out of the United States. They're not going to do that. They want to come over the border. The lawyers on the other side give them a script to say they get asylum, and then the loopholes in the laws that we have say if you're with a minor child, you can only be detained for 20 days. Then you're released, and then you get a piece of paper with a phone number on it, and maybe you'll be processed
we trust
in 36 months.
ICE to process people properly, and if they have a couple of thousand people come in all at the same time, then they just have to beef up the enforcement. One of the things we can do is support Mexico in their efforts to give many of them asylum. They've offered asylum to many of them. Some of them have accepted it. Some of them have refused it. But I think if we gave Mexico some resources to make their asylum offer even more attractive, a lot of them would just stop where they are, and they didn't start in Mexico. They started in Central America, where they're fleeing horrible situations, violence, gang violence, corruption, and if we give Mexico some resources, I think it would be a lot easier for us doing that than trying to figure out processing people at the border. There's a lot we can do. We can handle it.
Look,
and it doesn't involve just opening the border and just walk right in. Everybody would have to go through some processing.
So are we in agreement that you just can't let 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 people walk in? Are we in agreement on that, Congressman?
Yes.
Okay, good. Let's move on. The president yesterday saying that he wanted to find a way to revoke or find the loophole in the 14th Amendment to abandon the birthright clause. That basically what he's saying is if you're here in the country illegally and you have a baby, that just shouldn't be given automatic birthright citizenship because these become anchor babies, and now there's a whole cottage industry that people come in pregnant in order to sidestep the legal process system. What is your reaction to that, and why?
Well, I think most experts, including the Speaker of the House, the Republican Speaker of the House, said that would require a constitutional amendment.
All right, so
you can't do it by executive order.
Are you personally in favor of ending that practice?
The birthright citizenship, yes. And what I would wonder how that would work. If you're 18 and you go to register to vote, how do you to prove that you're eligible to vote? You got to prove that is it both parents that have to be citizens or just one?
One.
Okay. You got to prove that at least one of your parents is a citizen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. Then your grandchildren, if you're not a citizen, and then what happens to the next generation? I mean, can half the people in America couldn't prove their citizenship today?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so, it may work. It may work for infants for a little while, but by the time you've gone a generation or two, it would cause such confusion. People who've lived here all their life, they have children here, and the children can't register to vote because there's some question about how the parent got here. If you don't have birth records, and even if you do have birth records, I've always been concerned the fact that you can produce a birth certificate that says somebody named John Fredericks was born somewhere. Is that you? Did you just adopt the name John Fredericks because you had somebody else's birth certificate?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's hard to prove these things, and it's just another technique to let people who are different from you know that they're not welcomed here. And I think that's a horrible message.
All right, so Congressman, if I want to paraphrase what you're saying so I understand it. And by the way, we're with 3rd District Democratic Congressman Bobby Scott. He's my congressman. He's unopposed this election. If he was opposed, I would vote for Bobby Scott because he's my congressman and he does a great job, even though we don't agree on all the issues. But if I can paraphrase what you said so we understand it, I think what I've heard you say is, as a matter of policy, you're opposed to the birthright citizenship clause, but you think right now that if you were to change it administratively, it just wouldn't work, and there's got to be a better way.
I support the clause.
You're in favor of the clause?
Yeah, I'm leaving it like it is.
You're in favor of leaving it like it is. Okay, I just wanted to be sure that I got that clear. Okay,
right.
Let's go.
And if you tried to change it, it would be impossible to administer. But the message, I mean, first of all, the president can't do it. So suggesting you do it, the only value in that is to send a message to immigrants that you're not welcomed here.
No,
I think that's just a horrible message.
I don't think that's true. I take total issue with that. I think the image he's trying to send is, we're going to close the loopholes, and if you want to immigrate into the United States, you have to do it legally. We have a process, and what he would like to see is go from chain migration to a process of immigration where it's based on economic needs. Same one that Canada has, same one that Australia has. So basically, rather than you get in grandma, you have to prove that you can be economically viable. That's the way Canada does it and Australia does it. And I'm going to do the same example.
If people come in, you have to prove that they have the resources to sustain themselves. That's part of the application process.
Right, but that chain migration negates that.
Have to show that they have the resources to make sure that the people won't be wards of states, so they'll be self-sufficient.
Well, that's not the way it's happening right now with chain migration. Let's get to the Saudis, and let's get to Khashoggi. I've been covering this, as you know, Congressman, in depth. Mohammed bin Salman, Crown Prince, I believe, has shown himself to be not trustworthy and generally incompetent. Everything the guy's touched has turned to complete crap. So here's my concern. He changes the story again yesterday. This is the 10th story the Saudis have had. 10th. And now the story is, well, the guy was just a bad guy. He was Muslim Brotherhood. He was a terrorist. He was a bad guy. So he had to go. This is the 10th story they've had in 22 days. The Yemeni civil war, where the United States is backing the Saudi Emirates coalition there. If you've seen the pictures and you know what's happening in Yemen, Congressman Scott, this is one of the biggest humanitarian catastrophes maybe in the history of the world. I mean, children are starving. Parents are feeding them leaves. I mean, it's a horrific situation. Why are we involved in that? And could this Khashoggi thing have an impact on a change in our policy going forward?
Yes. I think it has placed the focus on the regime. I think none of the stories, excuses, fabrications have been at all credible. I mean, I think it's fairly. Well, we don't know exactly what the facts are, but none of their versions have any credibility at all. And the fact that they keep changing means that something's wrong with their story. I think it does give us the opportunity to review, and I think many in the international community are using this as an opportunity to review what's going on in Yemen, and I think we ought to take advantage of the opportunity and change our policy.
What about the $110 billion memorandum of understanding we have with them on arms sales? Would you like that to stay in place or be reviewed?
Well, first of all, we need to get some clarity as to what you were talking about. If we're talking about 1 million jobs, I mean, you can't ignore 1 million jobs in the United States. I mean, you just can't ignore that. But I've heard estimates as low as 0 new jobs and a few tens of thousands, not millions. If that's what we're talking about, then it's not as much of a factor. But most in the international community have our competitors. If we don't get the job, somebody else is going to get the job. Most have taken the humanitarian, have had a higher priority for the humanitarian implications, and have canceled those contracts. And I think we ought to consider doing the same thing. And frankly, I think the number of jobs involved and the amount of money involved is not nearly as much as the president has suggested.
Well, you're right, except the Russians have said that they would certainly take the orders, and so would the Chinese. But I just, again, when the...
Well, some others have done just the opposite, and
yeah, Germany has.
We need to do something. The State Department has to have some strategy to make sure this doesn't happen again.
So
and the canceling a job contract may be the answer, but we got to do something.
We have to do something. I agree with that. And I just want to point out to our listeners that they keep throwing around $110 billion arms sales. That is not like cash changed hands. About $14 billion has been ordered. That is simply a memorandum of understanding. So maybe what the president means is after the $110 billion is spent, it might be me and jobs. But right now they spent $14 billion. All the other is simply a promise and a memorandum of understanding going forward. I just want to clarify that.
Or a possibility. You mentioned the fact that I'm unopposed. One of the things that's frustrating about that is I don't get to talk about the Higher Education Act and the future of higher education. Students are coming out with all these student loans, and the Republican bill that came out of the committee on a party line vote will actually make student loans harder to pay off. Make college more expensive for a lot of people, and student loans harder to pay off. We need an alternative that makes student loans easier to pay off and college more affordable. And we haven't had any discussion about the Higher Education Act. We have had some discussion on health care, and I've been amazed that Republicans around the country are all of a sudden protecting people with pre-existing conditions without any plan on how to do it. It's hard to protect people with pre-existing conditions, and you have to have a plan. It's virtually impossible without a mandate. They get rid of the mandate. You can't let people wait until they get sick before they buy insurance, because people will wait until they get sick till they buy insurance. People with insurance tend to be sicker. Premiums go up. Healthy people drop out. Premiums go up, and they spiral out of control. Every time they've tried to have guaranteed issue of insurance without a mandate, the insurance prices have spiraled totally out of control. And so when they say they're going to protect pre-existing conditions, they ought to explain with some clarity exactly how they're going to do it. We do it in the Affordable Care Act, but there's no, I'm sure you can do it some other way, but you just can't say you're going to protect pre-existing conditions without any plan to do it. And all we have is people banging on the table talking about pre-existing conditions without any plan other than to abolish the Affordable Care Act.
Congressman,
and so we need to make sure that we talk about those too.
Congressman, what is the Democrat message going into November 6th? What is your message right now? But you got to do it in 1 minute.
Well, it's not that complicated. Healthcare, make sure we maintain healthcare and improve healthcare, particularly prescriptive drugs, reducing the cost of healthcare and not blowing it up. Make sure that we can improve people's prospects for jobs. That means higher education that's affordable, job training, increase the minimum wage so that people can make more money, and deal with better priorities on taxes, not taxes for the top 1% in corporations, but for everybody else, and deal with the conflicts of interest and the corruption. I mean, it's for the people. We want to be for the people rather than for the corporations and the top 1%.
All right. That is your final message going into the midterms. When we talk Wednesday, are you going to be in the majority, yes or no?
Yes. And by the way, it's Bill Bowling. I think you didn't say his last name.
Oh, yes, Bill Bowling. Of course,
yeah.
Bill Bowling.
Yeah.
Yes, that's what I meant. I always call him Bill, and I forget to say his last name.